I want to thank everybody for being on the call today. These calls have been really beneficial to us as an organization, and thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to me talk about the business, which is a third child to me. And anyone who spends any kind of significant time with me will realize that I can talk about this business and industry at length. So feel free to stop me if I ramble on too much. We start these calls off with my background, how we got to where we are and what we're trying to do. And then we go right into Q&A, which is the most beneficial part of this call for everybody involved, us included. So just my own background, I come from a finance background. I got a master's of science in finance and an MBA, and I graduated during the Great Recession. So it wasn't super easy finding work. During that period of time, I worked my way through retail banking into brokerage with TD Ameritrade, moved into asset management with Merrill Lynch, and then lastly with T. Rowe Price, doing asset management with small business retirement plans. I worked very closely with business owners on a daily basis. I've always been entrepreneurial myself, selling things. I've always been kind of a merchant my entire life, and so it came very easy to me. I thought to myself, if I could have my own business, maybe it will scratch that entrepreneurial itch that was really always bugging me. And I thought maybe, I'll stop moving from place to place to place. And so I looked at businesses that I thought were going to be non-skilled manager centric that would allow me to keep my career in finance. At that point, in 2014, I had a Series 7, 63, 66, and the insurance licenses to do variable annuities, things like that. And so I was quite invested in my career in finance, and I didn't think I was going anywhere. And I decided to look for this side business because I was going to stay at T. Rowe Price, which was a very well-paying job, and it was a really fun job. I enjoyed it a lot. When I say non-skilled manager centric, basically what I mean is I didn't want to be in a business where your key employee is the difference between shutting down or not, if they're not there. And so, owning a pizzeria, if your pizza maker gets sick, then you either have to make the pizzas yourself or you're closing for the day, or you risk a subpar product, which is not good either. So, I looked at the quick lube space kind of as a quasi utility. People who, I looked at the oil change the same way as you look at like your cell phone bill. It's one of those things that everybody has to do. It's a necessity, and it's residual, it's reoccurring, and it's exponential. Once you build that customer base, it's a very sticky business. It's kind of like a barber shop where you find someone who does your hair the way you like it. You keep going back to that person until they give you a reason to try somewhere else. So I took over a shop in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I spent a lot of time in my desk at T. Rowe Price, kind of reverse engineering the space and going through Yelp reviews at the time. Yelp was still relevant, and just trying to figure out what the pain points in the industry were. And there's been this divergence in our industry that's been happening for some time now, where some of the larger players are going towards a more multi-care type business model. And then I wanted to double down on selling people back their time, the convenience play. It seemed very obvious to me at the time. For me, every single startup that was happening during that time, whether it was Uber or Airbnb, or smart fridges, just anything that reduces friction between the consumer and the end product or end service was what was attracting a lot of attention. And I think the pandemic only really amplified that behavior, where you never really thought that the drive-through at fast food could get any faster, and then mobile ordering became this thing that people order it, they show up, and the food's thrown through the window and you're off. Who thought that just yelling out a number, I want a number 3, you could get any faster than that. But selling people back their time, convenience is a big important factor in this. And so for me, it became about figuring out a way to make the service palatable for oil changes only, so that you can focus on what you're really good at. And that started with the building, because the Quick Lube building is an expensive building. It's an expensive process. And so we were able to put together a team that had designed a quick lube building that has all the same unit economics as a regular quick lube building, but at a fraction of the cost. And then we started looking at how do we scale this business in a way that's meaningful so that as electric vehicles start penetrating the market more, we're going to be the model that is left behind. And so, that's a really rushed version of the background, because I do think the Q&A is the best way to address people's individual questions on the model and what we're trying to do. But one thing I will say, and if you've listened to any of the founders calls before, I say this every time, but we do have a discovery day every single month where we go into the secret sauce. So please try to keep your questions to as high level as possible, because the secret sauce is really given out at the discovery day. That's the purpose of it. We really don't want to be doing that on this type of call. If you do have something really pointed and you can't make it to discovery day, please feel free to email me. But for the purposes of this call, I'd like to keep it just as general of a discussion as possible, and we can go into everybody's questions. So I'll let Michael curate the questions from here on out. And if anyone has multiple questions, I've got 20 minutes.
Okay. Costa, thank you. And by the way, Justin, who's on the call right now, is from Nashville, Tennessee, and he's actually going to be joining us at Discovery Day next week. So you'll get to meet him. Why don't we I'll run from left to right on my screen, if that's okay, and then we'll just do a round robin. If we have an opportunity to do a second or third set of questions, that'd be great. Anyway, Justin, do you have a question for Costa?
Sure. Out of all the, I guess, franchises around all the locations that you have, what do you feel is kind of like the main, one or two points that you see is the difference between a successful location compared to one that's not as successful?
I think one of the bigger things is staff continuity, especially at the manager position, and then having someone that believes in the model. Some of the most difficult employees are ones that we have to unlearn bad behaviors from other places, whether it's high pressure upselling of customers. And, a lot of the times it comes from a good place, because these guys, when you start a business, an automotive business, at least in the quick lube space, there's a ramp up period. So there's this period of time where every single car that comes through your doors is not coming back for another 3 months, or however long it takes for them to get through their oil change interval. And so while that does create this ramp up period, it does also create a exponential and residual period. And so for some people, some staffers, it's difficult to have a 5-car day, and so they want to try to get the revenue numbers up for the sake of the shop, because they want the shop to do well. And we had a manager in one of our stores, and his heart was really in the right place, but he started charging customers $1 for putting air in the tires, which is one of our courtesy items. And so I explained to him, like, long tail, that dollar means nothing. That dollar is not going to help us out. It might have got us $1 today, but the long tail of that is much broader and longer and bigger. So to just come back to your question specifically, I think it's about buying into the model itself and continuity of staff. I don't think location is as big of a deal. There's people in our industry that will vehemently disagree with that, but I think we are largely a destination business. I think people know, they wake up in the morning and they know they're going to get an oil change. So our best location is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is technically a city, but it's 48,000 people. And it's actually mixed in a residential neighborhood. Just happens to be an old neighborhood Gulf gas station that was converted to a quick lube building in 1985. And, it's not on the best street. It's not in the most, it's not on the main road with the Lowe's and the Home Depot, but it's by far our best store. And it has largely just had to do with continuity of staff, the staff believing in the model and providing this quality, fast service on a day in, day out basis. and then time. And time just, time is the ultimate thing in our business, because as the store gets older and people their intervals start overlapping, that car count starts going up, then you know that your people are doing it right if the numbers continue to trend upwards. So that's what I would say.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Justin. Costa. Brent, you're up next. Do you have a question for Costa?
Yeah, I'm sure I can figure out something. I think I saw somewhere on your site about. So my initial question is about driving those new customers to a new site. I'm a big believer in convenience as well. I think that's if you can sell convenience, you're going to be very successful in whatever you do. Now, having said that, how do you drive, and what is your marketing to drive new customers? Because I think once they experience this, because people hear an oil change like, well, yeah, I get oil change all the time. It's not a game changer, but when they have the ability to stay in their own vehicle and it's literally 10 minutes in and out, I think that as soon as they experience that, they'll really enjoy it. But to get them in the door or in the garage or whatever you want to say, how do you go about that, and what is your marketing ideas?
Yeah, and you just really nailed it with that question, because every person who comes through our doors is essentially firing their last person who did their oil change, because as great of a sticky of a business as this is, that applies to everybody involved. And so it's, sticky for us, but it's also sticky for the other oil changes. And people typically don't deviate from their normal experience unless they have a reason to. And it's usually revolves around price, experience, and atmosphere. So if you have a clean shop, then the atmosphere is good. They have no reason to go somewhere else. If they have a good experience, the employees are good to them, then they don't go anywhere else. And if you have a good price, then they aren't going to go somewhere else. So typically we utilize, in the beginning, we'll use heavy discounting tactics through the social media channels, especially still Facebook, Instagram. I know there's a lot of chatter right now because of the iOS 14 update that the Facebook is not the best channel for storytelling, brand building, and ads. But right now, bar none, penny for penny, dollar for dollar, it's still the best channel for doing paid ad spend. And so we do utilize a lot of Facebook. We're always trying new things though. So, we've done ads on Waze. We've done Snapchat geo filters. We're always going to, at the corporate level, be trying new things to see what moves the needle for the best expense. There are some markets that direct mailers still work. We utilize Groupon. We cycle on and off it. And I know that, anyone on this call that owns a restaurant or has worked in the food industry, you have a love-hate relationship with services like Grubhub and Uber Eats and DoorDash. But, it is a way of getting people in the door. And so at the end of the day, as many people as you can drive through that door, we completely agree with your premise the premise of your question is, once they're in our doors, we've got them. As long as our people do things right, and we hit on those three things, which is the atmosphere, the experience, and the price. And so, I view advertising through a couple different lenses. I view it as brand building, storytelling, and then of course the right hook of actually, doing discounts. And so through those three channels of advertising, we feel we have a pretty comprehensive approach to getting new customers.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. There's a phone number here that I saw dial in, and it's Alan Johnson, I think, from St. Paul, and it wanted to ask you if you have a question for Costa. Oh, hi, Alan. Are you with us? Were you on mute? Okay. Brennan, I don't know if you have a question for Costa. Thanks for joining us. No. Justin, let's go back to you. Any other questions?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, there'd be a lot of information with Discovery Day. So I don't have any other questions at this moment.
Okay. Brent, any other questions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I could go on for hours. Just a quick comment more than anything, and I find it really interesting. Your excuse me, your comment about location. How do you determine? You said the location is not as important as some people would think. How do you determine that? Well, first off, how did you determine that? And then the second question would be, you say your best location is in a urban area, and maybe and you say it's successful despite its location, and I would probably argue that it's successful because of its location. Only that, again, for convenience, if I can drive 5 minutes and get an oil change from my house versus making a destination out of it, I don't want to say I'm lazy, but I'm kind of to the point where I don't want to have to do anything that I don't want to need to do. So if I don't have to drive across town, to get that convenience, and I can do it here locally, closer to my house, that's probably what I'm driving for. And also, of course, driving to and from work, if I can knock something out doing that versus making a destination out of it, as you said. That's just my couple ideas and couple things popped in my head.
Yeah, of course, all other variables equal, the best location is always what you want. I just don't think it's as important in our industry as some of the other players might make it out to be. We've opened up the opportunity to go into strip mall parking lots, which is some place that Quick Lubes have never traditionally been able to go with the design of our building. And so that allows us to have that higher priority real estate. But I have a myriad of locations, whether it's North Versailles, Pennsylvania, which is an old steel town outside of Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, which is all essentially government employees because it's the capital of Pennsylvania. And then, Dillsburg, Pennsylvania, which is a town of 6,000 people that is a rural area. If the only option is, if the closest option to you is not convenient in the service, in the sense that you need an appointment, you have to drop your car off, you need to get a rental car, then it being closer to you ends up being negated by the actual service that we provide, which gets you in and out same day, same time, most of the time under 10 minutes if there's no line. And so for me, again, all other variables equal, the best location is always better, but it's not the end all be all for me in terms of this business. And when I say destination business, I don't mean like going far out of the way or anything like that. I just mean that people wake up in the morning and they know that it's an errand that needs to be done. So it's part of the plan. And so that's kind of how I view it.
Thank you. Brent, I think you've got an opportunity to ask another question if you'd like. Okay, let me check back with Alan. Alan, thanks for joining us. I think that's you. Do you have a question for Costa? No. Okay. Well, any other questions right now for Costa? And Justin, we'll see you next week. Brent, I know I just started working with you, and I think
sure.
A little bit about the Discovery Day, and maybe a little soon, but certainly if things change for you, we could get you in next week. I just need to know in the next day or so.
Sure, probably a little bit early. Got another question though. How many franchises do you have open and selling right now?
So we've been franchising for 12 months, almost to the day now. Our first discovery day was March 20th in Cleveland, Ohio. And we sold our first one very shortly after that. And so we've had a lot of success selling the franchises. We are in a very difficult period for supply chain, for new construction, things like that. So Q2, we expect to have 10 to 15 stores open. We have one store that opened on April 1st. That was our first location that opened. The second location is most likely going to be Gulfport, Mississippi, and that should be anytime in the next month or so. And then we have lots of permits that are in the works, just trying to hash out, trying to get these local town officials to push through some of these things. We tried to design our building in a way that met as much of the different geographic requirements possible. So our building has a wind load as if it were Chicago. It has a rain load if it were Seattle. It's got a snow load as if it were Maine, and it's got a heat not load. I can't remember the terminology for it, but it's based on the Houston market. So we've tried to create as little pushback as possible, but at the municipal level, things are really backed up right now. And then from a construction side of things, we've actually gotten ahead of a lot of the problems because we are able to mass produce these buildings. There is a pretty big lead time for garage doors right now, which makes things difficult, but that's on the new construction side. We're very heavily looking at conversions, but new construction would, I would prefer for the entire franchise system to be new constructions because I love the building design and I love the opportunities that our building brings. But, we're just coming off a very odd past 12 months in terms of there being a quote unquote crisis. It seems like every couple months, first it was the lumber crisis, and now we got energy, and we've got war in Ukraine, and Russia and Ukraine just happen to be two of the most largest exporting of different iron ores that are in a lot of the components that are used for construction and fertilizer and things like that. It's it seems like it's been an uphill battle from day one, but we're working hard every day to get these stores open as quickly as possible. We've beefed up our back office to help support the franchisees as they go through the real estate search and site selection part of this process. And, we hope that by the end of 2022, we'll have between 25 and 50 stores open.
Okay, thank you. And is there any, in terms of environmental regulations, is there anything special about this type of building that might give us a headache down the road with either EPA or your local environmental agency? Is there certain inspections we need that are above and beyond what a normal business would have?
Yeah, that was a point of contention even when I did conversions of our corporate stores, is trying to make the local, whether it's a fire marshal or whoever the governing body is, understand that below grade does not mean below ground, which there's a huge distinction there because gas stations have below ground tanks. And and we wanted to remove as many objectionable parts of this process as possible. So we utilize gravity tanks that are above grade. So we can't even say, that we have petroleum products below grade, let alone below ground. And then on top of that, just, most states recognize that motor oil is not a hazardous material. It's not like a laundromat or a different business that has chemicals that are classified as hazardous material. The only hazardous material is the used oil and antifreeze, if there is antifreeze kept on site. And because we don't do antifreeze services, that's usually an objection that we can stay in front of as well. But we provide a SPCC to every franchisee free of charge, which is a spill prevention, containment, and countermeasure handbook. That's something that some states will require you to have on file with the local DEP or EPA, whatever the different states call theirs. So for Pennsylvania, it's the Department of Environmental Protection. They actually don't require a SPCC on file, but just by having one, it's just one more thing that helps these, whether it's whoever the zoning commission is, whether it's if it's a local board, if it's an elected official, just we want to have the least amount of flags raised possible. So we've tried to come up with solutions for every objection that could be raised, including the ventilation of our pit. We don't have a fully open basement like the traditional quick lube. Not only did that reduce a lot of the expense of the building, but it also acts as a secondary containment unit. So the pit itself is just a concrete vault. Now there's going to be some towns that are going to require some sort of not ventilation. Everyone's going to require ventilation, but at the base of the pit, there might have to be an oil water separator or some kind of something of that nature, some kind of sump pump, and that kind of eliminates the containment side of that. But that's going to be based on individual requirements. And so our architect, who's based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, has a lot of experience and is licensed in a lot of states. And we've been able to hash through thus far a lot of those kind of questions from local officials pretty seamlessly. But as far as the tail end of your question, the remediation of the site down the road, because it's not a fully open basement, because it's literally just a 12-foot by 5-foot deep concrete vault, it would be if it's on, say, a parking lot, it would be the remediation would be just filling the pit in and then tarring over it and striping it. And we are committed to doing that at our expense after the first 15 years. So our franchise agreement is 15 years if you fulfill the entire obligation, but then at the end of the 15 years want to retire or for whatever reason move the site, at our expense, we will remediate the site.
And so there's no test wells required, things like that?
No, at most maybe a lot of the time it depends on the bank, not the local officials. I've purchased several quick lubes, and it's, different banks will require different tests that make absolutely no sense whatsoever. I've had to pay for phase twos that I know what the result is going to be before they happen, and it's literally just money thrown away. And then sometimes we've done just a soil test, and it's $1,200 for the soil test. They're testing to see if there's any kind of contamination. And at the end of the day, motor oil is a lubricant. It's no more hazardous than your chapstick. It's just less viscous. And so the additive packs and the detergents that are used in motor oil don't have the same kind of chemical makeup that gasoline, kerosene, diesel fuel, or even the perks that are used in that make laundry sites a nightmare. So it shouldn't be an issue. It's usually when a local official kind of goes on a power trip and wants to make something into nothing into something that it becomes a problem. But I've got experience in that. Our architect has experience with that because he's done Speedway gas stations for a long time, and so we have a lot of experience in that space.
And speaking of the bankers, do you have a bank you prefer, the ones that set up that can kind of work with us in terms of loans for purchasing land and the building and even the franchise fee?
So I believe, and I'll defer to Michael on this, but the franchise fee cannot be, I don't believe it can be financed. Michael and Frandevco can point to our partners on the business side of things. As far as the construction of the building and the land, we have a group of private investors that have committed to purchasing and constructing the buildings on our behalf. This is what makes our program different from a lot of the other programs that would require you to go out and get a construction loan, and there'd be a lot of upfront cost. You're talking about 20 to 30% down for materials, whereas in our process, the only upfront costs come in the form of real estate due diligence and a security deposit. And so, and that's if you go through our leaseback program. If you want to purchase it yourself, we surely through our master broker can connect you with lenders based on the different localities. So I'm purchasing a site in Milan, Illinois, which is on the border of Iowa. And my normal banker who rubber stamps most of my deals in Pennsylvania is a small bank called Orrstown Bank. And Orrstown doesn't do deals outside of Pennsylvania. It's just, something that they won't do. And so I got connected with a credit union in actually Mississippi. It's like I just actually set a closing date for that building, but our master broker connected me with them. It's like our Missouri Valley, not Mississippi, Missouri Valley Credit Union. Very seamless process, got the approvals, was able to purchase the building, got the phase 1 done, did the soil test. And actually when I was answering your question earlier, in my head, I was thinking about this bank because they did not require a phase 2, whereas some of the other banks that I've dealt with have. And it just made me chuckle to myself internally, because it's just kind of a crapshoot when it comes to these banks and what they require for these things. And so I'm saving $12,000 by not having to do a phase 2 on this property in Milan. But the short answer to your question is our master broker. If you do want to own the property and own the land up front, our master broker can connect you with a local lending source.
Sure. So speaking of you purchasing and opening your own locations, what is your master plan for franchising versus company-owned locations? Are you 50-50, or do you want to add so many until you get to your comfort level and then go all 100% franchise, or what's your goal?
So at a very macro level, the goal is to be the brand, the top of mind brand when it comes to the transition to electric vehicles, because there's 350 plus million registered internal combustion engine vehicles on the road. The do it for me consumer is outpacing the sale of electric vehicles right now. So our space is only going to grow in the near term, because there's just more people entering the market with internal combustion engines that previously were doing the oil change themselves that are now entering the market. And so for me, the reason I chose franchising was I wanted to present something to the market that I think will be the lasting model once electric vehicles do penetrate. And so I don't know what the percentage is going to be in terms of franchise versus corporate. It's very tempting for franchises to convert all stores to franchise as soon as possible so that they don't have to do any work and just collect all the royalty. I mean, that's exactly what Shell did when Jiffy Lube, when they bought Pennzoil, was they converted 100% of Jiffy Lube franchises to franchise owned. And you kind of see what the fallout of that was, because when your only source of revenue when you're a franchise is royalties, then how do you get that royalty to increase? And that's by increasing the top line revenue. And then that put Shell in a position to put pressure on Jiffy Lube to start doing higher ticket item services, which ultimately I think is going to be a problem for them. And so I think it creates an opportunity for someone to step in and kind of change that top of mind brand awareness when it comes to the quick lube space. And so that's where franchising comes in for me, is just I want to get to scale so that when the transition starts happening in a more meaningful way, that we have scale. And opening stores from the corporate side of things is more opportunistic than anything. This particular site in Milan, Illinois, it's a small town. The building owner approached me randomly via, I think it was actually even Twitter, just said, "Hey, I have this building. I'll sell it to you for pennies." There's a certain dollar amount where you just can't not make money in this game. Right. I mean, it's a very difficult business to fail at. And so the building was cheap enough. And I was able to get cheap financing. At the time, obviously rates are about to go up. And so, why outlay the cash when you can, finance it cheap? And so we're buying the building, and I can sit on it as long as it takes to, put it together. Because my focus right now, my main focus is the support of the franchisees. And we have a lot of people that are about to come to market. So my attention needs to be on that. And so that's, there's no real specific answer to your question though, in terms of percentage corporate versus franchise.
Okay. So probably my last question. So looking at some of your poor performing locations, I consider, obviously I kind of like you, I kind of view it as a commodity. Everybody needs an oil change. I mean, most people need an oil change. So it's kind of a commodity. So they're always going to be looking for service and price versus just about anything else. So what's the biggest problems with your poor performing stores? And how did you propose to fix those with either your company, your corporate owned or your franchise owned stores?
Some of the poor performing stores, it's kind of the inverse of your first question. There's been a lack of continuity in staff. We've had stores that we've had multiple managers because it's very important to get that manager position right, especially when you're running it essentially semi-absentee, if not fully absentee. And then some of it just revolves around population size and population outflow, and then proximity to competition has an impact. I don't think it's as big as some other people place on it. I actually don't mind being near Jiffy Lube because it tells me that the consumer base is educated on the service experience, and that all we have to do is show them there's a better mousetrap and get them in the door, and we're pretty good at that. But I would say that the overall answer to your question is it's a combination of lack of continuity of the staff, and then just population size and outflow of population. If the town is diminishing, then that doesn't help. A lot of our early stores, or not even early stores, a lot of our stores are again based out of convenience, especially when there's only a certain amount of inventory of quick lube buildings available, and they don't come to market very often. And when they do come to market, it's usually because other people have been unable to succeed in them. And so we have had uphill battles at a lot of locations because they've been had bad operators in them previously, and it takes time to get that out of the system before people start to really come in. And we've been pretty successful at turning around bad locations. It just takes time.
Sure. Yeah, it's just like another grand reopening. It's a lot of marketing, and just really putting the effort in, being there and being present.
Yeah, I mean, there are some Brant, there are some amazing stories. Costa has a location in Youngstown that half of the area around it really is industrial, and my feeling is that the manager and the technician have had a 5-year, working relationship, and this guy's just been phenomenal and grown that business tenfold. Had a really bad brand image prior to that. I think they were doing 3 to 5 cars a day, and they've grown it dramatically over a 4-year period. And I think what Costa said is very much plays into the tenure. I know that they've never had to buy a lunch for the last couple of years because the clients just love them. They bring them lunch every day, almost like a barbershop type of effect. So yeah, and then we've also made sure, Costa spent a ton of money on a software platform to evaluate different markets. And I may not have shown you this yet on one of our calls, but we've made sure that we've tried to provide a minimum number of people, population, and vehicles in particular areas for the franchisees, a minimum of 50,000. Some of those locations go way up to even 200,000. Just to give you a reference point, we have a location in Dillsburg, Pennsylvania. Generally, most of the clients come from within about 3 or 3.5 miles from the location. And in Dillsburg, you've got a tiny population of 6,000. And in our FTD, we've actually, shown what a facility can do in a small environment like that. So yeah, it does. Location is not as important. It's more about the service level and the sort of friendly environment and the cleanliness that you provide that brings these people back?
Sure. Yeah, I think, definitely just about any business service is going to be king. If you're not doing what you need to be doing, people are going to be going somewhere else. My interest would be also a question of, I'm sure there's some sort of formula for number of households per square mile versus number of miles driven for work. Because I know in different communities, there can be a huge swing. Like say in Wichita, where I'm at, there's quite it's a very small drive time to work. We're kind of known nationally as 15, 20 minutes max. So the amount of driving for work, which I imagine that most people drive mostly for work and not for pleasure, their oil change interval would be higher than they would be in, say, in Oklahoma City, where they might have to drive, 30, 35 minutes to work every day. So it's just very interesting to me how that kind of plays into, need for an oil change and population density.
Yeah. I know we're running up against the clock here. Brian, thank you for all of your questions. Any last questions from anyone else on the call? Justin, I think you're still with us.
Yeah, no, I don't have any other questions. Like I said, I'll be at Discovery Day next week, and I know that y'all said there'd be a lot of content there and get into the nuts and bolts of things, and I'm sure then I'll have some additional questions.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. I do want to mention that the founder calls are actually posted in the Costa Oil website, and it's right at the bottom of the page under franchise portal. So if you are interested in learning more and listening to any of the other ones that we've done, I think we have about 12 in there right now. You're welcome to go and take a look at those. Thank you, Costa, for posting those for us. And thank you for all being on the call. Brant, you and I'll be working together more. I'll show you territory, and then hopefully we'll have you come to a Discovery Day, one of those. We have one in May. It's the 18th and 19th. Costa, thank you for your participation today.
Thanks, Michael. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Yep.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.